The air in the orbital research station Daedalus was usually thick with the low, steady hum of cryogenic servers and the distant static of deep space communications. For Dr. Elias Vance, it was the sound of home. But today, the familiar ambience was drowned out by the frantic, high-pitched alarm of a system overflow. He was not supposed to be in Sector 7, the restricted legacy data wing, a section officially marked for decommission. Yet a decade of being marginalized after his controversial theories on xenolinguistic symmetry had driven him to this illicit search. Vance had always maintained that the universal language wasn't mathematics or physics, but a pattern of recursive narrative embedded in the cosmic background radiation. A story the universe told itself. The galaxy's ruling body, the Coalition of Sentient Worlds, CSW, had dismissed him. Now hunched over a console flickering with a catastrophic data cascade, he knew they were wrong. He had bypassed 7 firewalls and a legacy quantum lock to access the source, the primordial data core recovered from the ruins of the progenitor species. An extinct civilization so ancient their star system was a black hole. What he found was not a weapon, nor a history lesson, but a registry. The data wasn't encrypted. It was simply mistranslated by every known galactic AI. Vance's symmetrical narrative model cut through the noise, translating what had been classified as planetary environmental seed code Drapiidon, Earth, into its true, terrifying meaning, designated origin point, humanity. Status active. Purpose, containment and observation. Activation protocol imminent. A cold dread, heavier than any gravity well, settled in Vance's stomach. Humanity, his species, was not a natural-born resident of Earth. They were a sophisticated, purpose-built entity, a seed. And the entity that built them was long gone. The realization that every war, every historical timeline, every evolutionary theory was a carefully crafted narrative, a lie, nearly made him vomit. But the final, most horrifying line solidified his resolve. It wasn't a timestamp, it was a warning. The activation protocol was triggered by the approaching energy signature the CSW had been tracking for months and dismissively labeled the Echo. An anomalous, non-baryonic energy wave rapidly propagating from the galactic core. The data specified the Echo was not a natural phenomenon, but a reclaimer. Vance had minutes. He knew the moment this data was uploaded to the CSW network, the fragile galactic balance would shatter. The warring factions, the imperialistic Krill, the isolationist Zidonian hegemony, and the trade-focused Centauri Concord were locked in a bloody stalemate over resource allocation. If they learned Earth was not a random planet, but a linchpin, an asset with an imminent activation protocol, the conquest of Earth would cease to be a priority. The galaxy would instead fight for control over the secret of human creation. He didn't upload it. He broadcast it, using a pre-CSS legacy frequency band, an obsolete, slow but untraceable method. Vance transmitted the raw, untranslated data packet coupled with his own verified signature and the single, devastating phrase in the Krill and Zidonian languages: "Your ancestors did not evolve. They were planted." He bypassed all the official channels, sending the information simultaneously to every major military, religious, and academic center across the 3 warring factions. He aimed for saturation, not compliance. By the time the Daedalus security team breached Sector 7, Vance was simply staring at the console, watching the initial reactions cascade through the news feeds. Panic, denial, and a terrifying, unified halt in the bloody skirmishes over Sector Alpha 9. The Echo was approaching, and the galaxy had just learned its greatest mystery lay dormant inside the most insignificant of species. The ceasefires were already beginning. The galaxy wasn't attacking. It was asking. The moment the broadcast hit, a palpable stillness fell over the galactic battlespace. The Centauri Concord, notorious for their calculated self-interest, were the first to issue a formal, if guarded, cessation of all aggressive action toward the Sol system. The Krill Empire, whose entire doctrine rested on the purity of their evolutionary lineage, went into immediate, frenzied denial. Their main battle fleet, already en route to blockade Earth, went silent for 3 hours, then issued a chilling, non-negotiable demand: surrender the source of this lie. The Zidonian hegemony, known for their ancient, almost spiritual devotion to pre-galactic history, responded in a manner that chilled Vance more than any threat. A small, solitary flagship, the Purity of Origin, detached from their main fleet and set a direct course for Earth, its transmission carrying a single, urgent request for a parley with the purveyor of the code. Vance, now held in a makeshift interrogation cell on Daedalus, but treated with an unnerving, almost reverent caution, watched the spectacle unfold on a heavily filtered monitor. He was no longer a disgraced academic. He was a nexus of cosmic interest. The station commander, Captain Rella, a veteran CSW officer with a face carved from granite, refused to engage in the political frenzy. You broke 27 protocols, Vance, but if your data is true, you may have just ended a war or started a worse one. We hold you until the CSW determines your value. The value was determined swiftly. 3 days after the broadcast, the Sol system was no longer a backwater. It was the most heavily monitored, most strategically vital point in the known universe. 3 massive distinct fleets, Krill, Zidonian and Centauri, sat just outside the Kuiper Belt, not in battle formation, but in a tense triangular holding pattern. Each had brought a diplomatic contingent, a significant military escort, and a terrifying array of academic and religious experts, all desperate to confirm, analyze, or destroy the data Vance had released. The diplomatic crisis was unprecedented. No neutral ground existed. Earth was deemed too volatile and too central to the secret. The solution, proposed by the Centauri, the masters of commerce and neutrality, was a massive, converted cargo vessel, the Pax Romana, designated a temporary interspecies truce zone and anchored in orbit between Earth and Mars. Vance, escorted by Captain Rella and a squad of elite CSW guards, was transferred to the Pax Romana, the most important and potentially most dangerous man in the galaxy. The conference room aboard the Pax Romana was deliberately minimalist: a circular table, neutral grey walls, and 4 chairs. Vance, in his simple Daedalus jumpsuit, felt the weight of 100 galaxies on him. Facing him were the 3 delegates. Ambassador Vrexis of the Krill, a 6-limbed reptilian, whose skin shimmered with aggressive red and black patterns, spoke first. His voice was a rasp of pure fury. "Human, you propagate a heresy that undermines the entire Krill narrative of self-determination. Produce the complete progenitor archive immediately, or your Earth will be quarantined and your species will be studied." Next was the Zidonian delegate, a non-gendered being named Kajel, whose appearance resembled living quartz. Kajel spoke in a slow, rhythmic cadence that was both melodic and deeply unsettling. "The ancestors speak of the first garden, the seed that holds the key to the Void Eater. If your data validates the ancient texts, then the activation protocol you mentioned is the prelude to the Echo's arrival. We do not want your Earth. We need your knowledge." Finally, the Centauri representative, a sleek, bioengineered humanoid named Emissary Theron, cut straight to the bottom line, his voice synthesized to be perfectly calm. "Dr. Vance, the approaching energy wave, the Echo, will disrupt all hyperdrive travel and render our trade routes obsolete within 3 planetary rotations. We have instituted a truce, not for moral reasons, but for survival. Tell us what the Echo is and how the human seed can stop it. We will compensate you richly." The silence that followed was heavy with mutual suspicion and the realization that all 3 powers had a singular, terrifying common enemy: the imminent arrival of the Reclaimer. Vance realized the true danger wasn't the war he'd stopped, but the desperate, fragile peace he'd forged. His life and the fate of humanity was tied to a truth he had only just begun to comprehend. The negotiations were not about land or resources. They were a race against the clock, with the Echo's accelerating trajectory serving as a merciless countdown. Vance was locked in a high-stakes, multi-species collaboration, effectively turning the Pax Romana into the operational headquarters for galactic survival. His life was spared only because his brain was the sole key to translating the raw progenitor code. The delegates, Vrexis the skeptic, Kagel the mystic, and Theron the pragmatist, formed an uneasy, volatile council. Vance, using a hybrid translation matrix combining human cognitive linguistics with Zidonian, ritualistic narrative patterns, finally managed to stabilize and decode the crucial section of the progenitor file, the containment protocol. The progenitors, it turned out, were not just creators, but wardens. Their advanced society had discovered a universe-ending entity they termed the Void Eater, a sentient entropic force that consumed the memory of matter itself, leaving behind a silent, sterile void, the ultimate dissolution. They couldn't destroy the Void Eater, but they could contain it by establishing a boundary of highly complex, self-replicating, evolving narrative structures. Essentially, a living firewall, the Earth, Vance explained, gesturing to the complex, biological code that outlined the human genome, is not a planet. It's the container, and we, humanity, are the code. We were designed not to be a perfect unified society, but a fragmented, chaotic, and relentlessly creative one. The constant invention, the diversity of languages, the endless conflict, the rapid cultural evolution, that's the strength. The sheer unpredictable complexity of the human narrative itself is the encryption. Our stories, our myths, our technology, our art, they are all layers of a self-generating, randomized encryption key that forms a barrier against the Void Eater. Vrexis. The Krill ambassador scoffed, his serpentine neck extending in disbelief. A wall of story. Our fleets possess plasma torpedoes and gravity manipulators. You claim a nursery rhyme as a defense mechanism? Precisely, Vance countered, his voice steadying with sudden fierce confidence. The Void Eater, or the Echo, as it's currently manifest, is a force of perfect simplicity and absolute silence. It consumes patterns. The progenitors realize the only defense against simplicity is unpredictable, self-complicating chaos. Look at human history. We invent religions and then abandon them. We create languages that die out. We build empires only to tear them down. We are the ultimate noise generator. The activation protocol is simply the moment the Echo gets close enough to hear the noise. Once we are fully activated, our complexity spikes, and the firewall is reinforced. Kagel, the Zidonian, extended a crystalline appendage toward the screen, its light pulsing with affirmation. The ancient texts speak of the sacred disarray. This is the confirmation. The human seed is the source of the protective chaos. The problem, however, was that the progenitor file also detailed the consequences of the Echo breaching the containment protocol. If the entity found a way to simplify the human narrative, to enforce perfect, predictable order, the firewall would fail. The Echo would consume humanity's collective memory first, turning them into docile, silent shells, and then use that simplified, high-energy core to propagate its silence across the galaxy. This was why the Zidonian texts called it the Void Eater. It didn't destroy matter. It erased its meaning. Theron, ever the pragmatist, immediately saw the terrible implications for the Truce. If the chaos is the defense, then a sudden artificial peace imposed by three warring factions could be catastrophic. We must allow their natural chaos to continue. The question hung heavy in the air. Vance realized the irony. The truce he had created to save humanity from war might be the very thing that damned them all to silence. The key, hidden in the deepest layers of the code, suggested one final desperate measure: the unified narrative shift, a controlled surge of human-generated complexity. an unprecedented burst of creativity designed to overload the Echo. The solution was a gamble that defied all military logic and xenolinguistic convention. The progenitors had designed a fail-safe, a method for accelerating the chaos code via a massive, simultaneous surge of unpredictable human creative output. Vance called it the Unified Narrative Shift, UNS. He explained the concept to the disbelieving delegates. We cannot fight the Echo with weapons, and we cannot save humanity by imposing peace. We must amplify the very thing that makes us unpredictable. Every broadcast center on Earth, radio, television, the internet, must be commandeered. We need a simultaneous global cascade of unpredictable information, not news, not propaganda, but raw, unfiltered human imagination. Vrexis, still reeling from the idea that human art was a cosmic defense, finally conceded with a rasp of pure tactical logic. If the chaos is the shield, then we must weaponize it. What do you require to implement this? Story bomb? Vance outlined his audacious plan. He needed the combined resources of the three fleets. The Centauri were required to use their deep space comms array to synchronize the broadcast across the entire planet, overcoming all national firewalls and latency issues. The Krill, with their advanced energy transfer technology, were to modify the broadcast, not to transmit sound, but to project the narrative energy, the informational entropy, of the global feed directly into the incoming echo wave. And the Zidonians, with their intimate knowledge of progenitor energy manipulation, were tasked with locating the three major, ancient anchor points on Earth, geographical nexuses of human mythological activity, to act as the final focusing conduits for the surge. The execution was chaos in itself. On Earth, billions of humans were told, via a unified worldwide broadcast, that they had mere hours to contribute to a global creative defense initiative. They were told to upload their most unusual poems, their strangest scientific theories, their most detailed fictional worlds, their most irrational fears, and their most heartfelt, contradictory truths, all at the same time. The world's media, initially thrown into a frenzy of confusion, was soon overwhelmed by a tidal wave of creative madness. Amateur operas, proofs of impossible mathematics, 5,000 different endings to a single novel, and a billion conflicting personal manifestos flooding the network. Aboard the Pax Romana, Vance monitored the entropy index, a scale he had developed to measure the complexity of human interaction. It was spiking, rising at an exponential rate. As the Echo, now visible as a massive silent shadow on the edge of the solar system, began its final approach, the Krill focused their modified projectors. On Vance's command, the Centauri initiated the synchronized global broadcast. The energy surge was colossal. The sheer density of information entropy, the noise of billions of contradictory human stories, was channeled, amplified by the Krill tech, and beamed into the silent, simple wave of the Echo. The effect was immediate and visually stunning. The black, smooth shadow of the Echo hit the wave of human narrative and recoiled. It didn't explode or shatter. It simply began to fracture. The geometric, simple structure of the entity could not process the complexity. The perfect simplicity was bombarded by the ultimate noise. The entropy index peaked. And then, with a deafening screech that was heard only within the deep space comms, the massive shadow of the Echo dissolved, not into debris, but into nothingness, a complete erasure of its pattern. The progenitor firewall held. The containment protocol was successful. Silence returned to the Sol system, but it was a silence of profound awe, not dread. The three fleets held their position. Vance stood exhausted in the conference room, watching the now stable entropy index. Emissary Theron was the first to speak. His synthesized voice tinged with genuine wonder. The debt is incalculable. You saved the trade routes? Human. Vrexis of the Krill simply stared at the monitor, his red eyes narrowed in grudging respect, a species whose stories can stop a cosmic force. The Krill Empire must reassess the meaning of power, And Kagel, the Zidonian, offered a final, serene pronouncement. The sacred disarray has prevailed. The seed has proven its purpose. The galaxy owes its future to the chaos of the human heart. The immediate truce had saved them all, but the truce itself was shattered by the new reality. Humanity was no longer an insignificant speck. They were the galaxy's most vital, most volatile, and most powerful defense mechanism. The next negotiation would not be about war or peace, but about the terrifying responsibility of being the galaxy's unpredictable shield. Galaxy's unpredictable shield.